Welcome to News Beacon, your trusted source for breaking headlines, global insights, and sharp analysis from around the world. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. For decades, the US dollar has been the world's default currency, powering global trade from Brazilian coffee to Saudi oil. This dollar dominance gives America immense power. Most international trade is conducted in dollars, making the US the financial center of the world. The constant global demand for dollars allows the US to borrow cheaply and wield sanctions as a potent foreign policy tool. When Washington wants to pressure a country, it can cut off access to the dollar system, as seen with Iran, North Korea, and Russia. The dollar's strength is built on trust in the US economy and its financial institutions, especially the Federal Reserve. Major banks worldwide keep accounts in New York to clear dollar transactions, embedding the dollar deep in global finance. For decades, the idea of a serious alternative seemed unthinkable. The dollar was the ultimate safe haven. But this dominance has bred resentment. Many countries feel the US has too much control over their economies. American political decisions can ripple worldwide, hurting nations uninvolved in US disputes. This reliance on a single currency creates vulnerability. What if the US economy falters, or a country lands on the wrong side of US policy? These concerns have grown, especially as US sanctions have become more frequent and far-reaching. Now, other powers, most notably China, are working to build a different path forward. The world is beginning to question whether the dollar's reign should continue unchallenged. And China is leading the charge to create a true alternative. In response to dollar dominance, China has built the Cross-Border Interbank Payment System, or CIPS. Launched in 2015, CIPS is designed to let businesses worldwide trade directly in yuan, bypassing the US dollar and banking system. It's not just a technical upgrade. It's a strategic move to boost the yuan's global role and China's influence. CIPS connects Chinese banks with financial institutions globally, making yuan transactions easier and more attractive. China encourages its Belt and Road partners to use CIPs, slowly eroding the dollar's monopoly in trade. The system is a direct response to US sanctions, offering countries like Russia and Iran a way to keep trading without touching the dollar. CIPS is more than plumbing, it's a shield against American economic pressure and a step toward a multipolar world. As CIPS grows, it challenges the financial architecture that has defined global commerce for over 70 years. For Beijing, every new user of CIPS is a win in the contest for global financial influence. The world is watching as China builds a parallel highway for global payments. To grasp CIPS's challenge, we need to understand SWIFT, the backbone of global finance for decades. SWIFT is a secure messaging network banks use to send payment instructions, not money itself. Most SWIFT messages are for dollar transactions, making the system dollar-centric and vulnerable to US political pressure. CIPS, by contrast, combines messaging and settlement, clearing funds in yuan directly and streamlining the process. This cuts out intermediaries, reducing time and cost for yuan-based trades. SWIFT is governed by a global cooperative, but its ties to the dollar system make it susceptible to US influence, like when Iranian banks were disconnected. CIPS is state-owned, run by China's central bank, and operates by Beijing's rules. While SWIFT still dominates in volume, CIPS is expanding rapidly. With over 1,500 institutions in more than 115 countries as of 2024. The choice between SWIFT and CIPS is strategic. SWIFT means stability, but US oversight. CIPS offers insulation from US sanctions, but new dependence on China. As CIPS grows, it's not just about efficiency, it's about shifting the balance of financial power. The world's financial plumbing is being reconfigured, one transaction at a time. For many, the question is no longer if, but when, CIPS will become a true rival. The stakes are high control, influence, and the future of global finance. The competition is just beginning. The impact of CIPS is clearest in countries already using it, like Russia. After Western sanctions cut Russia off from SWIFT, Moscow turned to Beijing, settling much of its trade with China in yuan via CIPS. For Russia, CIPS is now an economic lifeline, keeping oil, gas, and goods flowing. Other countries are following suit. Pakistan paid for Russian oil in yuan, bypassing the dollar entirely. African and Latin American nations, many with China as their top trading partner, are integrating CIPS to streamline commerce. Even U.S. allies are hedging. Brazil and China now trade in their own currencies, connecting banks through CIPS. Argentina has used yuan to pay IMF debt, showing the currency's growing reach. In the Middle East, Saudi Arabia is considering pricing some oil sales to China in yuan, a symbolic blow to the petrodollar. Each new adopter adds momentum, building a coalition outside the dollar-based system. The shift is gradual, but the foundation for a new financial order is being laid. Washington is increasingly alarmed by CIPS's rise. U.S. officials once saw the yuan's global ambitions as limited, but CIPS's growth, especially after sanctions on Russia, has changed that. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen admits that overusing sanctions could erode the dollar's dominance. The risks are real. Less global demand for dollars could mean higher borrowing costs for the U.S. government and consumers. The exorbitant privilege of cheap borrowing would fade, forcing America to tighten its belt. The Congressional Research Service is studying de-dollarization, signaling serious concern at the highest levels. Geopolitically, CIPS threatens America's ability to use sanctions as leverage. If adversaries can trade freely in yuan, U.S. sanctions lose their sting, weakening American influence. In response, the U.S. is strengthening alliances, promoting the transparency of its system, and exploring a digital dollar to stay competitive. The reaction isn't panic, but calculated urgency. The dollar's dominance is no longer guaranteed. CIPS is the most significant challenge to America's financial power in the modern era. The U.S. must adapt or risk losing its central role in global finance. The stakes are nothing less than economic and geopolitical leadership. For most Americans, the dollar's global role may seem distant, but a shift would hit home. If the dollar loses its reserve status, borrowing costs for the government and for ordinary Americans would rise. Higher interest rates would make mortgages, car loans, and credit card debt more expensive. The government might face tough choices, raise taxes or cut spending on vital programs. A weaker dollar would also mean pricier imports, squeezing household budgets and raising the cost of living. Inflation would hit especially hard for low and middle-income families. The dollar's strength has long cushioned the U.S. economy. Losing that edge would make America more vulnerable to shocks. Investors could see more volatility in markets and retirement savings if global capital flows shift away from the dollar. The financial security of millions is tied to the dollar's standing. The debate over CIPS isn't just global politics, it's about the future prosperity of American families. The rise of CIPS is about more than money, it's about power and sovereignty. For decades, U.S. control over global finance has been a key tool of statecraft, allowing Washington to impose sanctions without military force. China and others see this as a threat to their independence, arguing the U.S. has weaponized the dollar. CIPS is their answer, a system immune to American pressure, giving countries freedom to trade regardless of U.S. relations. This could split the world into two financial blocks, one led by the dollar, the other by the yuan. Such a divide could complicate global cooperation and force countries to choose sides. The big question, can these systems coexist, or are they headed for conflict? The battle is about competing visions, transparency and rule of law versus sovereignty and state control. The outcome will shape the rules of the global economy for years to come. The future won't be a simple swap of dollar for yuan. The dollar's dominance is deeply rooted, but the era of unchallenged supremacy is ending. A multipolar currency world is emerging, with the dollar, yuan, and euro sharing influence. Trade may increasingly be settled in regional currencies, Asia in yuan, the Americas in dollars, Europe in euros. This will make global finance more complex but also more balanced. Technology will accelerate change. Digital currencies could lower barriers for new challengers. China's digital yuan is already integrated with CIPS. A US digital dollar could help maintain competitiveness. The competition will play out in both traditional banks and the digital realm. For the US, maintaining the dollar's appeal means strong economic fundamentals and prudent policy. Washington must use sanctions carefully to avoid driving more countries to alternatives. The future of the dollar depends as much on US choices as on China's ambitions. The next chapter of global finance will be written by both sides. The world is watching and adapting. The global economy stands at a crossroads. For 70 years, the dollar has provided stability but also concentrated power in US hands. Now, China's CIPS and the yuan offer an alternative, appealing to nations seeking more sovereignty. The choice is no longer between one road and none, but between two competing systems. Every transaction, every policy shapes the future financial landscape. The trend toward a fragmented multipolar system is gaining momentum. This is more than finance, it's the economic front of the US-China rivalry. The outcome will define global power, international relations, and the rules of the 21st century. The world's decision will echo for generations.